Hi, this is Rob Sheen with the Source Conference, and I'm here with Ming Fu, who's the Security Solutions Architect with Cylance. And he's going to be speaking at the Source Conference on May 9th and 10th coming up in Boston. And his talk is on combating ransomware with AI, which is a really interesting topic. So ransomware has been in the news a lot over the last, especially the last year or two. And, basically people get malware in their computers. Instead of just erasing their files, their computers get locked up and they have to come up with Bitcoin to unlock them. So how can AIs help us solve that where other things have failed?
Absolutely. So what we've seen is the sort of a ransomware getting into the mainstream, and as a result of that, people are now talking about how can I possibly keep myself safe when I go online, surfing the web, answering email. And if you look at the stats, right, ransomware has become one of the biggest sort of annoyances, right? And you hear all sorts of different advice from people saying, you should probably get some Bitcoin just in case, which I disagree. And then another camp is telling us to possibly get all the files backed up so that you don't lose them. So different strategies, different kind of lines of thinking. But as a security practitioner, what I'm thinking is, why can't we just block them? Why can't we just stop them on their tracks? And that's exactly what Cylance is doing. From a technology perspective, what we are focusing on is something we have always advocated, the notion of prevention. So if we can prevent malware from executing, then you don't really have to worry about necessarily backing up your files or getting the Bitcoin account for yourself so you can pay ransom, get your files back. So this is a completely different strategy. And the reason why not too many people are talking about, combating malware or ransomware with the prevention strategy is, for the most part, they just don't have a very effective way for doing that. And again, the underlying reason for that failure is really the technology in use today, which is mostly signatures, heuristics, and the behavior. I have to laugh when I mention behavior because if you consider behavior in the context of ransomware, and then you say, let me watch to see if anybody's encrypting my files, that's not a winning strategy. By the time you watch and then see file being encrypted, it's a little bit too late, right? So in this case, the only successful strategy has to be prevention. Prevent ransomware from being able to execute in the first place. And that's exactly what we do, using the next generation technology, not signatures, not heuristics, not behavior, but something that's driven by machine learning, data science. These are the type of next generation technologies that can prevent the execution of ransomware with the predictive model as opposed to a reactionary signature where a patient zero is required. So that's exactly what we need to really focus on. So that's going to be a main theme of my talk. And then instead of necessarily putting out a lot of slides, PowerPoint, all that, I wanted to, show a couple of examples as to how we combat the true ransomware. For instance, you've heard about WannaCry, Padia, not Padia, and then maybe even Bad Rabbit. So those are the type of a common ransomware that you see in the wild. And I can even show you some of the more sort of recent developments in terms of ransomware as a service, how you can literally generate ransomware on the fly. And those are presumably brand new zero-day type of threats. How do we deal with that? Signatures are not going to work for you. So we've got to take a new approach. And the new approach that I'm promoting is artificial intelligence. So that will be the core of my talk.
All right, cool. So I have some follow-up questions. So
Please.
uh, so the proposed solution, where does that live? Is that something that would be on the endpoint or out in the cloud somewhere or somewhere else?
So just like any endpoint-based tool, you're going to have an agent that lives on the endpoint. But the beauty of that, and this is something that's totally different. If you look at today's kind of a current generation of antivirus, anti-malware solutions, what you see here is the signature database is so big. You can't possibly stuff all the signatures into a single stat file. So you end up literally pulling in all the things from outside world, such as cloud lookup has to be enabled in all these other sort of AV tools, and then in some cases it's relying on some sort of a sandbox, which means you are always relying on something that's happening in the cloud somewhere else, and then a few minutes later you get the result. The truth is, users today are not very patient. If it's going to take more than a couple of seconds, that's just not a good solution. So the beauty of our AI-based solution here is by having a mathematical model that's predicted in nature and it lives on the endpoints, the endpoint protection is autonomous, meaning it doesn't rely on anybody else. It can make a decision in split second, actually more or less within 15 milliseconds to say this file is good or bad, or this file is ransomware, and then block it from being able to execute before it has a chance to do any harm. So that is a much better and a more acceptable type solution from users' perspective. Nobody wants to sit around and wait for your sandbox to run. And a lot of times, as you've heard, there are a lot of tools available on the internet, even on the dark web. The bad guys have developed good technologies to evade sandboxing detection. So if you are relying on the type of things that attackers have figured out how to evade, that's not necessarily dealing with the problem. So that's why we need a new approach. And this new approach I'm proposing is machine learning, artificial intelligence.
Got it. So all right, so it's an endpoint solution and the software is kind of figuring out on the fly whether or not things are good or not. And so, but you mentioned that you're not using signatures, heuristics, or behavior analysis. What's left? Like, how are you able to detect something reliably using this kind of an engine?
So that's why it's so revolutionary. So if you think about all the technologies that we have looked at and that we have deployed within the anti-malware world, signatures, heuristics, behavior, sandboxing, and everything so far has proven to be reactionary and kind of subject to human intervention. Someone has to develop a signature or YARA rules for whatever malware that we are trying to block. Machine learning and the data science is different. So in this case, when you have a predictive model in place, what you get is the ability to analyze a file statically and then arrive at a conclusion very fast. So that this is something similar to high frequency trading in the financial world, new drug development, using some of the data that's been collected in the past 10, 20 years. And to really have the ability to tell you something and detect something that you have never seen before. So machine learning model, when it's properly developed, gives you the complete ability to predict and prevent that type of cyber attack. And then we've seen that happen within our customers. To give you an example, when WannaCry broke out on May 12th, 2017, our customers were protected. They were running a model that we released in November of 2015, a full 18 months before the release of WannaCry ransom. So what does that mean? What that means is, without having seen the malware, the ransomware, that came out 18 months later, the model had the foresight, had the ability to predict what the next generation of ransomware looks like, and then effectively blocking and quarantining these ransomware files pre-execution. So now you are talking about no updates necessary, right? No cloud lookup, no relying on signatures, heuristics, or behavior, or sandboxing. So if you think about this approach is totally different from everybody else. And that's why, I'm always happy to see way back in 2016, Silence won the Thomas Edison Innovation in Security Product Award. And one of our customers, made this analogy. So what did Thomas Edison do? That's different, right? So the only difference here is, before Thomas Edison, everybody is using some sort of combustion-based technology to generate light. So you have light, but you do that by burning some sort of fuel. It could be a gas, that's a gas light. It could be a wax, that's your candles, right? And then you have all sorts of ways, but fundamentally, it's all by burning something to get the light. After Thomas Edison, what we are doing today is we take electricity and then we use the light bulb to really generate light. So the whole fundamental approach is different. And then that's exactly what we've done within the antivirus, anti-malware field, which is to really, as opposed to primarily rely on signatures, heuristics, etc., we remove that dependency. We use predictive modeling, and then that made all the difference. That means no more daily updates of signatures, no more daily scan of your hard drive when you are trying to do something heavy duty, your AV starts to scan, and then you have to literally take a break because your machine slows down as a consequence of it. So with this type of a new technology, we see the potential of literally getting rid of all that sort of old infrastructure and to start anew to really have something that's autonomous and then that's self-sufficient. That way, you get the protection without all the hassle of the cloud lookup, having to update all the time, and the so-called cascading water fountain that's typically associated with anti-malware, meaning you maintain a server, your server get the latest updates from whichever vendor, and then you push the latest signature down to everybody within your company. If someone is traveling, he doesn't get it, he's not protected, it will never happen again if you use machine learning. And
well, that makes sense as long as it's all working. But so I'll throw you one tough one because I've been doing computers for quite a long time, and I've seen a lot of bold claims about new technology. And this sounds fantastic, by the way. It sounds like a really good model. But given that you're kind of putting all your eggs in our software is going to find all the problems predictively, what happens when something does something that's unpredictable and they come up with something new and novel? How do you then, if you've taken away the mechanisms to get the updates down to them, how do you get that fix out to people?
So you are pointing to a sort of theoretical, hole in all this type
there's
of.
There's always theoretical holes, man.
So exactly. So we are not claiming 100% coverage. So through the field test that we've done since the product was released in 2014, in the past almost 4 years, we are able to prove that our efficacy is way better than anybody who's using a signature. So we are roughly at 99.8%. So what that means is we do have holes in terms of the coverage, but that's a lot smaller than any next guy. So on average, our efficacy is about 2 to 3 times better than the next guy. So think about what you can achieve with that kind of efficacy. But even more remarkable is the notion of false positive, because in security, when you turn your secure dial all the way up, in every you're going to sort of touch on things that can trigger false positive. But in this case, with 99.8% efficacy, we are seeing a much lower false positive rate. So on average, our false positive is roughly 0.0005%. So 3 zeros before 5. And as of now, the industry average is roughly 0.5% across the board. So this is roughly 1/1000th of the industry average. So that just goes to show the power of artificial intelligence. So it's really why our customers love it, because not only they don't have to worry about maintaining infrastructure, getting everybody up to date, and that sort of thing. They tell us now they can, really spend time with family and friends over, the weekends and nights without necessarily thinking, gee, did I get the latest update to, the CFO? He's going to travel somewhere. So this is a big relief if you think about the operational benefit for the security team. And it's truly remarkable if you think about all the things that you don't have to do in this context.
Yeah,
so
no, I mean,
that's why.
If it works, it's clearly advantageous. I just generally, I've learned to be very gun shy about making any kind of absolute statements about anything in security, because as soon as you think you got it, like something surprises you, and you're like, oh, that didn't work. So just like to keep the conversation balanced around those ideas, just because long term, the bad guy is always, it's an arms race, and there's always going to be someone that figures out the way around.
Oh, yeah. So I would argue at this point, we are seeing a remarkable difference between our approach and the sort of a traditional approach.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, a step forward. Are we going to able to stop all the future attacks?
I assure you the answer is no.
Exactly. So
it has to be, right?
The keyword is all. So that's why, we are always building the next generation model, taking into account the new tactics, techniques, and the procedures that's taken used by the attackers. And that's why, at Silence, we say, think evil, do good. You always want to think like the bad guy in order for us to really catch the next wave of attacks. So that's also the beauty of this industry. So you and I will, work for a long time before the whole thing is finally fixed, which I doubt that will happen, right?
Never going to happen. As long as people are writing new software, people are going to screw up software, so it's never going to happen.
Exactly. Vulnerabilities will always exist, and you and I will definitely, be doing this, fighting this good fight for a long time to come.
No question. All right, Ming. Well, it's great talking to you, and I look forward to seeing your talk at Source Boston. And for those that want to come by and continue the conversation on this topic, this is a really good topic. I'll probably have some more questions for you at the event, because the whole arms race thing is a topic that fascinates me. So
absolutely.
I look forward to continuing the conversation at Source Boston in May.
Same here. Thank you for the chat.
Great. Thanks a lot. Talk soon.
Take care.